There's a wisdom in having an enlightened guru look like an enlightened guru. And the wisdom is that to someone who doesn't know their true nature, if he looks important, maybe what he says is important. And this is one of the biggest issues that we find. And this is one of the biggest things that we are moving away from in today's age. We think that truth is something outside of us. Like, not just outside of us, but outside of our capacity to ever realize it. The craziest paradox is that in order to get the separate self to be interested and in order to get it to be aware that there is an alternative way to see what we are, you have to make it a big deal, because otherwise it just doesn't listen. How many people do you know that you could change their lives, but they don't want to listen to you? Right? They want the other thing instead. So you have to create a big enough signal that eventually someone will hear it further down the line. You see what I mean? There's a wisdom in making it seem important. It is a wisdom in making it seem like it's this absolutely like unfathomably significant. It is significant, but unfathomably unreal like state that is just too far. You've got to get a couple of lifetimes in before you can realize your true nature. There's a wisdom in making it seem exotic. The wisdom is most people would not listen otherwise. We've created such a brand for it that we're actually then convinced that this is something that I cannot achieve in this lifetime, or something that is just this exotic thing that only very special people are able to find. And therefore we create another problem, which is that now we have to take that out the way. That was only important just to get your ears to perk up. Now we take that away. It's not like that. And this is one of the biggest things that the separate self has to come to terms with. And the reason for that is because the separate self always wants to seek. It doesn't want to seek. It is the wanting to seek. You see, it's not a thing that wants things or doesn't want things. It is the very function of seeking. In other words, you're always you, your true nature. There's just sometimes patterns that make you seek. That's the separate self, is the seeking in combination with your true self. You, as you are, seeking. That's it. There's no other. It doesn't get much different than that. And the you that seeks is like this repetitive pattern of thought, feeling, and therefore action. We make actions based on thoughts and feelings. The thoughts and feelings come from a belief. The belief is that we're a separate, independent entity existing in a separately independent universe, and that every object has its own existence. So in other words, like we think that everything is real, and it has its own independent reality, and that it's not contained inside a reality. So we could say that everything in a game has a reality, but the independent components of the game don't have a reality. You see what I mean? Their reality is borrowed from the code, let's just say. In other words, we think reality isn't like that. We think that reality is made of real things that exist independently. We don't think that they come from the same source. We think they come from different sources, and those sources have their own reality, and there's loads of different realities, and they all just take place here. And this is where the separate self comes in. It does so because we think we're a separate, independent reality. We think the consciousness that is in our head is a separate consciousness to other heads, and we look out into an external world. The true understanding is simply that there is only one reality, and that there's no independent individual making actions. But that doesn't mean that nothing makes actions. It means everything makes actions. When we think everything has a separate reality, something fundamentally real, and it's separate from the other things that are fundamentally real, that's where we create separation, and that's where we suffer. It's terrifying for the separate self, the one that believes itself to be inside the body looking into a separate world that has independently existing real things inside that have no correlation to one another. If you basically identify, if you believe that you are fundamentally something, you will fear the disappearance of that thing. Of course you would. Why would you not? It's natural to fear the disappearance of your existence. It's not a problem with that. So if you were the water or the ocean and you thought you were the wave, you would fear going towards the shore, because the closer you get, the closer you are to your own evaporation, to your own dissolution. So you're going to be scared the closer you get, or the further you get, whatever it might be, to the shore, if you think you're the wave. Because it's true, the wave will eventually evaporate. The only thing is that we think, so there's two dimensions to this. Firstly, we think, I, the separate self, will evaporate. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to die. I don't want to die. Then we go, okay, I'm not the separate self. And then we understand that to some varying degree. But then we think that, I am consciousness, but my individual consciousness, just like a wave, is going to go and just fizzle out into the ocean of consciousness. And my whole experience, all my individuality, and that creates another idea of death. We think it's going to be a different death. We're like, yeah, I know I'm not going to die, but I'm kind of freaking out about like going into this ocean of consciousness again and not having an individuality, a sense of individuality. That's another fear that we find. The separate self fears losing what it thinks is inherent to itself. So if you are the water and you think you are the wave, if you lose your waveness, the function which is the wave, you will fear not having that. If you think that is essential to you, the function of waving, because you think you're the wave, you will fear losing that. But you're not the wave. So the thing that we're really seeing here is that all it takes is to see what you are. You can have this in a glimpse. And that glimpse, we need to make importance on the experience you might have had in the body, and your interpretation of it is purely a memory. Because after that experience takes place, that memory is just an interpretation. You can't remember your true nature. It's not possible. So any state that you think you've had in the past that you remember, you don't remember the actual truth. You remember your interpretation of the truth. So if I had an experience and I said, yes, I was one with everything and this thing and this thing, the one with everything is a thought that I computated as a result of the truth that was then clothing the experience. So then I come back and I say, yes, I had an experience of the truth. I was one with everything. And what happens is we instantly make this not the truth and that experience the truth. And then we have this incoherence with reality again, based on an interpretation. Because for some reason right now, this is actually, the moment you had that awakening and this experience right now are the same now. They're not two separate nows. So the truth that is innate in that experience is the one that's here right now, which is also the same exact place. So any memory that you have is not a memory of the now. You can't remember the now. You can't remember the truth. You can't remember your true nature. You only remember your interpretation of it, because the truth is now. And what we're seeking is not a state. So the state that you had in that moment, that was just, think of it as just a pleasant, happy distraction. Because what's really taking place is taking place now. And if that is different to what happened then you're looking in the wrong direction. You're not looking at the truth. You're looking at an experience of the state of the body and the mind. And for as long as this is coming back to the same thing at the start, the separate self will seek. Its whole identity is the function of seeking. So it's like, think of function of seeking like wave. You are the water. Function of seeking is the wave. If the function of seeking comes to an end, what do you think is going to happen? You won't want that to happen because you will think that is death and you don't want to die. So you will try to varying degrees to create this subtle function of seeking happening, which looks like the form of, I've had these awakening experiences, this thing happened, and the function of seeking takes place on a very subtle level. We seem to have this glimpse of the truth, but we don't live in it, and there's a dichotomy and a separation between the now and the now. We create a distance between now and now, an illusory distance between now and now, based on the fact that then was a state, now is not the state. That creates this distance. This distance turns into seeking that same state or a similar state or another state or some varying degree of peace feeling in the body or the mind. And then we subtly search for another state. The reality is that the bog standard, neutral, boring state that you're currently in is the state to be. And when you get completely okay with that boring, bog standard state, the one that you will no longer want to change, that is the truth. Because the thing that wants to change it is your separate self mechanism of playing out, which is wanting you to stay away from where you are, which is the function of seeking. Because if it came to an end, just like wave to an ocean, it would dissolve. And if you think you're the wave, you think you're going to dissolve. So it takes courage to take this path, and it takes a level of trust. Trust got me through this path. Above all else, it was trust. I trusted the understanding of someone else, the parents of someone else, and it helped me relieve my fear. Because when I thought I was going to die, there was a moment where I was sitting and it was getting so subtle, I thought I was going to blip out of existence. I thought this is the moment of my death. I thought this is how you die. This is how you disappear. I thought my sense of individuality was going to be gone. We know later now that's not an issue. Individuality is not an issue. Duality is not an issue. We'll go into this in another video. I thought I was going to blip out of existence. But then I remember someone saying, this is what it's like to pass through the eye of the needle. And I just trusted that. I just trusted the sentiment in that. And I completely let myself die. It's a weird place to describe, because you're not really thinking things, but there's these subtle realms of just intention, and I don't know. But it was like the sentiment of, if I'm going to die, then kill me. If I'm going to be taken away, if I'm going to dissolve, let me dissolve. And in that moment, nothing dissolved, nothing changed, apart from the realization that how could I dissolve? Because I realized the one that was trying to dissolve was never there. So the one that could die can't die, and it was just clear that one that was fearing death was never there to begin with, and the only thing that was there cannot disappear or die or dissolve. If we're willing to die for the truth, if we're willing to die, you will realize that you won't die. The price you pay to be willing to die is the reward of not dying. What's terrifying for the separate self is completely illusory. So it's necessary to feel the fear. It's just not necessary to fall for what it is telling you. So just don't fall for what it is telling you. In the moments that you feel this fear, which I know almost everyone will, or to some degree go through, just remember this is the only thing you have to do. Just remember this. And you will have the courage to go through it. When you do, you will laugh. You'll laugh like the rope on the snake and the rope. You were petrified over the snake on the road, and you got a bit closer and it was just a rope. It is just literally like that. Beyond that point, there's not a state that we attain. We can't think of it as an end process. You know, there's been people in my community and things that they say, I finally know self. There's finally no self. And there's almost a celebration. We want to see it. There's still an element of condition to that. There's a place where we stop caring. And there's a place where we are so curious and interested about life. We're so curious and interested in truth. And we realize as a body mind that we're not perfect. And the quest ends, the seeking ends, and the adventure begins. That place is better than any place I was ever told I should have been. Because regardless of whether I was enlightened or unenlightened, that place is the funnest place to be. And there's no suffering there. You can't. If you're truly there, unconditional happiness is imminent. It is liberation in action. This true, pure, passionate desire for truth is the best place to be. Understanding shapes itself through and with the heart of that intention. Without that, understanding, true understanding, does not take place. It doesn't. It's that you will end up one of the guys who say, I'm on the path for 20, 30 years and I get it, but still I'm not happy. It'll just be like that. That will be your experience. I get it, but I'm still suffering. You see, that's why. I have a retreat at the end of the year, December, Marbella, 1st of December. We'll be going through these exact processes and a load of other things, which I think you'll love. If you want to learn more, if you want to apply the links in the description. I also have a free community as well where I do meditations for free and you can see all the exclusive content that I make that doesn't get put out to YouTube. If you'd like to be there, I'd love to see you there. Have an amazing day, guys. Take care.